set to kick off the card at the women's bantamweight division. We have Jessica Rose Clark taking on Julija Stoliarenko, and it has to be said, if you go onto the UFC's website and you look at the fan rankings, sometimes you can pick up on certain things that other people might not know. There might be fighters that have joined the UFC that haven't really been talked about all that much. There might have been fighters that are dropped. UFC Roster Watch on Twitter. I'm looking at you.
A good follow.
But when you go on the UFC's fan rankings and you strip out all the ranked fighters, now all of that includes Norma Dumont, who's at 15, but is she a bantamweight? Is she truly a featherweight? So I'm going to say that Norma Dumont's a featherweight. I take that list, and then I take the list of fighters that I can pick out of the pool. There's 6 other fighters in this division that are not ranked, so if you win, all of a sudden you're ranked, and that includes the 2 fighters that you have coming up to kick off this pay-per-view card in Jessica Rose Clark and Julija Stoliarenko. They're joined there by Jocelyn Edwards, Stephanie Egger, Tainara Lisboa, who hasn't even fought in the UFC, Bia Malecki, who got beat by, well, you know her, Josiane Nunes, and of course, Julija Stoliarenko. So it's slim pickings in this division. And then you have a look at the 2 fighters that are here. And for Jessica Rose Clark, she comes into the UFC and has, I guess, as big of a push she could have. Like, you're fighting big names like Paige Van Zandt. Matt, what do you make of that?
I don't know if she got the biggest push, to be honest, because at that time, Paige was a little bit past her prime, and people weren't really looking at Van Zandt as being a real contender at that stage of her career. I will agree with you, though. There was more than average hype for Jessica Rose Clark coming in. Again, my go-to fighter for this is always Emil Mack, because for some reason, he was pretty popular, but he never had a big win. It just always felt like
a lot of Venator fans out there.
But he did have a few things that set him apart. He was active on social media. He had the axe and stuff. He had that really unique look. So there were always a few things that would set him apart from your average unranked fighter. And for Jessica Rose Clark, she did have that really big win over Van Zandt, who again wasn't necessarily at the peak of her career. And honestly, that fight was terrible. Go back and watch it. It's a lot of Jessica Rose Clark laying on top of Paige Van Zandt, not doing a lot with her top position, just kind of riding out the rounds. And that's the thing about Jessica Rose Clark. She does have really good wrestling. I would say that's sort of the foundation of her whole game plan. She's someone who will recklessly just strike into the clinch and try to go for takedowns off that. But the problem is, she's not an active grappler after the fight does hit the floor. And there are some fighters who can make use of just sitting in a full guard, sitting in a half guard, and they can really damage their opponents. Weird example, but Mirko Cro Cop, the second time he fought Gabriel Gonzaga, he stayed in his full guard and elbowed him into the ground. It was like some disgusting stuff. If you're a really high-level striker, normally those skills do kind of translate to your ground and pound. I know it sounds weird because ground and pound is much more kind of a grappling part of your game, but a lot of high-level strikers still have good ground and pound. Jessica Rose Clark, again, not a high-level striker, but you get the idea. She doesn't really have those parts of her game to really make fighters pay for being underneath her, and that's always the hard part about predicting one of her fights. You could think, hey, she's going to go 3 for 3 with her takedowns and get about 8 minutes of control time. But is she going to do enough with those 8 minutes of control time to really be able to secure those rounds in the minds of judges? Some judges, yes, but others not so much, and that's why I always find it really hard breaking down a fight of Jessica Rose Clark.
Yeah, because for Clark, she'll throw a good one too. Does she throw the most leg kicks that you've seen in this division? Not necessarily. She utilizes her wrestling, but kind of like a TJ Brown, Jessica Rose Clark can get herself in some really precarious positions on the ground. That happened in her last fight against Stephanie Egger. She loses that fight by armbar. Matt, then we throw it on over to Julija Stoliarenko, and this is really the big talking point. Because, Matt, I'm going to talk about Stoliarenko's career highlight. She was featured on The Ultimate Fighter. She went 1-1 and lost to the eventual finalist, Penny Kanza.
It's like an Anthony Bennett highlight reel.
The UFC said, Red Rover, send Julia over. Let's give her a real fight in the UFC. She loses to Leah Letson, so they go, okay, we don't need none of you. So what does Julia do? Well, she picks up a tiny little win streak outside of the promotion. She goes, hey, let's get some art of the 9-limb, experience, and I'm going to fight Lethway a little bit. And she wins. She is a champion in Lethway. She is a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt. And Matt, though she did go 5-0 outside of the UFC from 2019 to 2020, she fought once in 2020, she lost. She fought once in 2021, she lost. She fought once in 2022, she lost. So, I don't know, negative 1.52 strike differential, but this is the craziest part about Julija Stoliarenko. Is she necessarily like Ronda Rousey at the height of her powers? No. But for Julia, all of her wins by submission are by armbar. And you watch the way that Stoliarenko fights, and we can really break it down technique for technique. Like, Stoliarenko strikes like a car crash, and I watch her fight, and I look at Vanessa Demopoulos from last weekend, and it's like, okay, in your set positions on the ground, you're a great grappler in that respect. When it comes to the striking, it's a little odd. I mean, she does train Muay Thai. She's trained over in Oslo, Norway for this fight, working at Frontline Academy. We've seen her with Hodger Gracie working some of these things here and there. But for Stoliarenko, her bread gets buttered when she has her back to the mat and she's looking for those submissions, looking for that armbar. You look at her against Alexis Davis in her last fight. Davis beat her soundly, but in that first round, Julia Stoliarenko went for 2 or 3 of the tightest armbars I've ever seen, and Gumby Davis, just doing Niagara Falls stuff, was able to get out of those. But Matt, most people would have tapped out of that. I find it crazy that Julia Stoliarenko, on a 3-fight losing streak like this, is still in the promotion.
So am I.
But further to that, again, she has those pieces of her game that the UFC's keeping her around. She's outside of the top 15, and Jessica Rose Clark can struggle in some of those positions.
She can, but she also has a lot of positives in those positions, too. Like, for Stoliarenko, she's going to waste a lot of time off her back. We talked about this with Louis Smolka for years and years and years and years and years and years, performance after performance, and that's what I worry about with Stoliarenko. Unless she does get the finish by some kind of submission, I don't think she has really any component of her game to be able to win rounds. And again, I know a big part of my talking point on Jessica Rose Clark was, hey, she could really get the takedown and then that's it. I would still much rather side with the fighter that I think can get it to the spaces where they want the fight to be, as opposed to a fighter who's just going to take the fight where the positions come, and she'll try to fight her way out of that. And again, it's not that I'm really confident in Jessica Rose Clark, and she is a fighter who I feel like after her ACL injury doesn't really fight in the same manner that she used to. She used to be a little bit more aggressive. She used to be a little bit more explosive with her takedowns. I don't think she has that same kind of level of athleticism behind a lot of her techniques, but I still think it's going to be enough to beat Stoliarenko, who in the UFC up until this point has not been able to show that much. I understand some of those submission attempts were tight on Davis, but Alexis Davis is a 39-year-old fighter in this division. If they were that tight, she would have tapped out to it, and I know she's got heart for days, but again, I do think Jessica Rose Clark fights in a similar manner to Alexis Davis, and unless she does get caught by one of those submissions, she's much more likely to be able to pick up minutes and rounds throughout this fight.
And for Jessica Rose Clark, if she's going to capitalize on the Alexis Davis plan, Gumby arms and knee wraps. Judo Dan knee wraps, that's how you win it. That's how Davis is able to do it. When you do look at Rose Clark, again, she had those 2 big wins, 2020, 2021, against Sarah Alpar and Jocelyn Edwards, but her last time out, the wrestling got her caught against a great judo player and great jiu-jitsu player in, of course, Stephanie Egger. So we look at the odds for this one. I don't know who decided that Julia Stoliarenko should have been a minus 205 at open. That's what Best Fight Odds shows. Now, it corrected itself quite quickly, so I'm sure we'll hear from some people out in the comment section. Plus 112 right now. For Clark, opened at a plus 175, minus 135. So we have a look at the Tapology votes. Matt, surprise test there to you. Jessica Rose Clark, A, now the favorite. B, more people know her, and she's not on a 3-fight losing streak. I'm going to say over under 75% Clark here.
I don't think she's that famous. I think it'll be lower, but she'll be the favorite.
Okay, 775 total votes, 92% Clark, 90% by decision. For the 8% that have Stoliarenko, 49% by decision, 38% have her to win by submission. So Matt, the fans, 92% of them have Clark. The odds have Clark as well. Is the pick here Jessica Rose Clark?
It is, and again, I'm not confident with this fight whatsoever. Like you said, if a fighter starts as a minus 200 favorite and then the line adjusts itself in like 30 minutes, you know something's a little off about this fight. But again, I always go back to this. Think about how both fighters fight. I would much rather Jessica Rose Clark put herself in a bad position by trying to fight to win than Julia Stoliarenko just allowing herself to be put in poor positions and then trying to fight her way out of it. Again, stylistically, Stoliarenko does have some of the jiu-jitsu that Jessica Rose Clark does traditionally struggle with. I just don't think she can use it sustainably throughout her fighting style. So I do think Jessica Rose Clark, by the slimmest of margins, can win a decision. But again, this is a fighter who had a pretty close fight with Jessica years ago. And you would think, okay, you're a younger prospect. You had a close fight with someone who's very established in this division. I still feel like Jessica Rose Clark ever really reached the potential that a lot of people saw for her, but I still think she'll be able to get this win.
Clark for this one training at Combat Sports Academy with Dakota Dichdeva, who's a mixed martial artist. She's got some Muay Thai kickboxing in her back pocket. Adam Piccolotti, Bellator's own, and Chad Mendes. Thick boy Chad Mendes.
The scariest man you could fight in bare knuckle right now.
He's entered into the chat, and if you do look at it for Clark, she just competed in a no-gi grappling tournament with Grappling Industries. I think it was her and Amber Laybrock in the picture, but I like the underdog, Julija Stoliarenko. I didn't like her at minus 200, but at a plus 112, why not take a flyer? Some of these underdogs have been winning early on in these cards with unranked women's fighters. We saw it out of Vanessa Demopoulos last week. We even saw it the week before with Silva against Jasovicius. And it's not that it's a trend, but for me, I look at it as who has the opportunity to stop this fight? Jessica Rose Clark's boxing looked amazing against Sarah Alpar. Her cage control is amazing in that fight. In the smaller octagon, larger one for this fight, Stoliarenko with the submission abilities. I've justified it in my mind, but again, it's a close fight between two unranked women's bantamweights, and there's only 4 other ones that exist on the face of this planet, so make a judgment on your own. We're split on the pick. I've got Lithuania's Stoliarenko, Matt going with Australia's Rose Clark. It's not Rose Clark, it's Jessica Rose Clark.
I didn't do it once.
And Clark. Matt, Pat's for Matt. But a big time fight coming up this weekend. 2 title fights up at the top. So keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks. We always say, let's get into it.